Just kind of focus. I don't know if this is working or not. Hello. My webcam is picking up noises, but not coming through the video for some reason. Hello. My webcam is picking up noises, but alright, I think it's working. I just can't be on YouTube. That's all. That's fine. You'll just have to deal with the OBS background. Um, so yep, this is me. I'm streaming right now. Hi. I'll be reading The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This is a really good book. Usually read it this time of year. It's November. It's when like things start to get really gross outside. Like stick season, I think is the name for it. And yet it tends to be really depressing. Gets me in a pretty foul mood. So when I first read this book, I was like, wow, I feel all of this. But in reality, it's really not that bad. A lot of people like this time of year, so you know, I just like reading it now because it's my favorite book. Um, so without further ado, I guess this book is dedicated to John Francis McCarthy, which is I think the son of Cormac McCarthy. Yeah, I'll just start. When he woke in the woods, in the dark and the cold of the night, he'd reach out to touch the child sleeping beside him. Nights dark beyond darkness, and the days more gray, each one than that had gone before, like the onset of some cold glaucoma dimming away the world. His hand rose and fell softly with each precious breath. He pushed away the plastic tarpaulin and raised himself in the stinking robes and blankets and looked out towards the east for any light, but there was none. In the dream from which he'd wakened, he had wandered in a cave where the child led him by hand, their light playing over the wet flowstone walls, like pilgrims in a fable, swallowed up and lost among the inward parts of some gigantic beast. Deep stone sloughs where the water dripped and sang, tolling in the silence the minutes of the earth and the hours and the days of it and the years without cease, until they stood in a great stone room where lay a black and ancient lake, and on the far shore a creature that raised its dripping mouth from the rimstone pool and stared into the light with eyes dead white and sightless as the eggs of spiders. It swung its head low over the water as if to take the scent of which it could not see. Crouching there, pale and naked and translucent, its alabaster bones cast up in shadow on the rocks behind it, its bowels, its beating heart, the brain that pulsed in a dull glass bell. It swung its head from side to side, and then gave out a low moan, and turned it and lurched away, and loped soundlessly into the dark. With the first gray light he rose, and left the boy sleeping, and walked out to the road, and squatted, and studied the country to the south, barren, silent, godless. He thought the month was October, but he wasn't sure. He hadn't kept a calendar for years. They were moving south. There'd be no surviving another winter here. When it was light enough to use the binoculars, he glanced to the valley below, everything paling away into murk, the soft ash blowing in loose swirls over the blacktop. He studied what he couldn't see. He studied what he could see, the segments of the road down there among the dead trees, looking for anything of color, any movement, any trace of standing smoke. He lowered the glasses and pulled down the cotton mask from his face, and wiped his nose on the back of his wrist, and then glassed the country again. Then he just sat there, holding the binoculars, and watching the ashen daylight congeal over the land. He knew only that the child was his warrant. He said, "If he is not the word of God, God never spoke." When he got back, the boy was still asleep. He pulled the blue plastic tarp off him, and folded it and carried it out into the grocery cart, and packed it, and came back with their plates and some cornmeal cakes, and in a plastic bag and a plastic bottle of syrup. He spread the small tarp they used for a table, on the ground and laid everything out, and he took the pistol from his belt and laid it on the cloth, and then he just sat watching the boy sleep. He pulled away his mask in the night, and it was buried somewhere in the blankets. He watched the boy, and he looked out through the trees toward the road. This was not a safe place. They could be seen from the road now that it was day. The boy turned in the blankets. Then he opened his eyes. "Hi, Papa," he said. "I'm right here." "I know." An hour later they were on the road. They pushed the cart, and both he and the boy carried knapsacks. In the knapsacks were essential things, in the case that they had to abandon the cart and make a run for it. Clamped to the handle of the cart was a chrome motorcycle mirror that he used to watch the road behind them. He shifted the pack higher on his shoulders and looked out over the wasted country. The road was empty. Below was a little valley, and the still gray serpentine of a river, motionless and precise. Along the shore, a burden of dead reeds. "Are you okay?" he said. The boy nodded. Then they set out along the blacktop in the gunmetal light, shuffling through the ash, each the other's world entire. They crossed the river by an old concrete bridge, and a few miles on they came upon a roadside gas station. They stood in the road and studied it. "I think we should check it out," the man said. "Take a look." The weeds they forded fell to dust about them. They crossed the broken asphalt apron and found the tank for the pumps. The cap was gone, and the man dropped to his elbows to smell the pipe, but the odor of gas was only a rumor, faint and stale. He stood and looked over the building, the pumps standing with their hoses oddly still in place, the windows intact. The door to the service bay was open, and he went in. A standing metal toolbox against one wall. He went through the drawers, but there was nothing that he could use. Good half-inch drive sockets, a ratchet. He stood looking around the garage. A metal barrel full of trash. He went into the office. Dust and ash everywhere. The boy stood in the door. A metal desk, a cash register, some old automotive manuals, swollen and sodden. The linoleum was stained and curling from the leaking roof. He crossed to the desk and stood there. Then he picked up the phone and dialed the number of his father's house he met long ago. The boy watched him. "What are you doing?" he asked. A quarter mile down the road, he stopped and looked back. "We're not thinking," he said. "We have to go back." He pushed the cart off the road and tilted it over where it could not be seen, and they left their packs and went back to the station. In the service bay, he dragged out the steel trash drum and tipped it over and hauled out all the quart plastic bottles. Then they sat on the floor decanting them of their dregs one by one, leaving the bottles to stand upside down, draining into a pail until, at the end, they had almost a half a quart of motor oil. He screwed down the plastic cap and wiped off the bottle with a rag and hefted it in his hand. Oil for their little slut lamp, to the light to light the long gray dusks, the long gray dawns. "You can read me a story," the boy said. "Can't you, Papa?" "Yes," he said, "I can." On the far side of the river valley, the road passed through a stark black burn, charred and limbless trunks of trees stretching away on every side, ash moving over the road, and their sagging hands of blind wire, strung from blackened light poles, winding thinly in the wind. A burned house in a clearing, and beyond that a reach of meadowlands stark and gray, and red raw mudbank where roadwork lay abandoned. Farther along were billboards advertising motels. Everything as it once had been had faded and weathered. At the top of the hill they stood, in the cold and in the wind, getting their breath. He looked at the boy. "I'm all right," the boy said. The man put his hand on his shoulder and nodded toward the open country below them. He got the binoculars out of the cart and stood in the road and glassed the plain down. There were shapes of a city. There were, whoa, yeah. I'm not having a hard time reading it because it's hard language that he uses, and it's just not stuff that I'm used to. But I'm trying. Can I continue? He got the binoculars out of the cart and stood in the road and glassed the plain down there where the shape of the city stood in the grayness like a charcoal drawing sketched across the waste. Nothing to see. No smoke. "Can I see?" the boy said. "Yes, of course you can." The boy leaned on the cart and adjusted the wheel. "What do you see?" the man said. "Nothing." He lowered the glasses. "It's raining," he said. "Yes," the man said, "I know." They left the cart in a gully covered with a tarp, and made their way up the slope through the dark poles of the standing trees to where he'd seen a running ledge of rock, and they sat under the rock overhang and watched the gray sheets of rain blow across the valley. It was very cold. They sat huddled together, wrapped each in a blanket over their coats, and after a while the rain stopped and there was just the dripping in the woods. When it had cleared, they went down to the cart and pulled away the tarp and got their blankets and the things they would need for the night. They went back up the hill and made their camp in the dry dirt under the rocks, and the man sat with his arms folded around the boy, trying to warm him. Wrapped in the blankets, watching the nameless dark come to enshroud them, the gray shape of the city vanished in the night's onset, like an apparition, and he lit the little lamp and set it back out of the wind. They Then they walked out into the road, and he took the boy's hand, and they went to the top of the hill where the road crested and where they could see over the darkened country to the south, standing there in the wind, wrapped in their blankets, watching for any sign of fire or lamp. There was nothing. The lamp in the rocks on the side of the hill was little more than a mote of light, and after a while they walked back. Everything too wet to make a fire. They ate their poor meal cold, and lay down in their bedding with a lamp between them. He'd bought he'd brought the boy's book out of the he'd brought the boy's book, but the boy lay but the boy was too tired for reading. Can we leave the lamps on till I'm asleep? He said. Yes, of course we can. He was a long time going to sleep. After a while, he turned and looked at the man, his face in the small light streaked with black from the rain like some old world thespian. Can I ask you something? He said. Yes, of course. Are we going to die? Sometime, not now. And we're still going south? Yes. So we'll be warm? Yes. Okay. Okay, what? Nothing. Just okay. Go to sleep. Okay. Going to blow out the lamp. Is that okay? Yes, that's okay. And then later in the darkness, can I ask you something? Yes, of course you can. What would you do if I died? If you died, I'd want to die too. So that you could be with me? Yes. So that I could be with you. Okay. He lay listening to the water drip in the woods. Bedrock, this. The cold and the silence. The ashes of the late world carried on the bleak and temporal winds to and fro, in the void. Carried forth and scattered and carried forth again. Everything uncoupled from its shoring, unsupported in the ashen air, sustained by breath, trembling and breathe. If only that my heart were stone. He woke before dawn and watched the gray day break, slow and half opaque. He rose while the boy was slept, and pulled on his shoes and wrapped in his blankets. He walked out through the trees. He descended into a gyric, a gyric, gyke, grike, I don't know, in the stone, and there he crouched, coughing, and he coughed for a long time. Then he just knelt in the ashes. He raised his face to the paling day. Are you there? He whispered. Will I see you at last? Have you a neck by which to throttle you? Have you a heart? Damn you eternally. Have you a soul? Oh God, he whispered. Oh God. They passed through the city at noon of the following day. He kept the pistol to hand on the folded tarp on the top of the cart. He kept the boy close by his side. The city was mostly burned. No sign of life. Cars in the street caked with ash, everything covered with ash and dust. Fossil tracks in the dried sludge. The corpse in a doorway, dried to leather, grimacing at the day. He pulled the boy closer. Just remember that the things you put into your head are there forever, he said. You might want to think about that. You forget things, don't you? Yes, you forget what you want to remember, and you remember what you want to forget. There was a lake a mile from his uncle's farm, where he and his uncle used to go in the fall for firewood. He sat in the back of the rowboat, trailing his hand in the cold wake while his uncle bent to the oars. The old man's feet in their black shoes braced against the uprights, his straw hat, his cob pipe in his teeth, and a thin drool swinging from the pipe bowl. He turned to take a sight on the far shore, cradling the oar handles, taking the pipe from his mouth to wipe his chin with every with the back of his hand. The shore was lined with birch trees that stood bone pale against the dark evergreens. Beyond, the edge of the lake was rip-rap of twisted stumps, gray and weathered, the windfall the windfall trees of hurricane years past. The trees themselves had long been sawed for firewood and carried away. His uncle turned the boat and shipped the oars, and they drifted over the sandy shallows until the transom grated in the sand. A dead perch lolling belly up in the water. Yellow leaves. They left their shoes on the warm painted boards and dragged the boat up onto the beach, then set out the anchor at the end of its rope, a lard can, poured with concrete, with an eye-bolt in the center. They walked along the shore while his uncle studied the tree stumps, puffing at his pipe, a manila rope coiled over his shoulder. He picked one out and they turned it over, using the roots for leverage, until they got it half floating in the water. Trousers rolled to the knee, but they still got wet. They tied the rope to a cleat at the rear of the boat and rowed back across the lake, jerking the stump slowly behind them. By then, it was already evening, just a slow, periodic rack and shuffle of the oarlocks, the lake dark glass, and window lights coming on along the shore, a radio somewhere. Neither of them had spoken a word. This was the perfect day of his childhood. This the day to shape the days upon. They bore on south in the days and weeks to follow, solitary and dogged. A raw hill country, aluminum houses. At times they could see stretches of the interstate highway below them, through through the bare strands of second growth timber, cold and growing colder. Just beyond the high gap in the mountains they stood and looked out over the great gulf to the south where the country, as far as they could see, was burned away, the blackened shape of rocks standing out of the shoals of ash and billows of ash rising up and blowing down country through the waste, the track of the dull sun moving unseen beyond the murk. They were days fording that polarized terrain. The boy had found some crayons and painted his face mask with fangs as he trudged on uncomplaining. One of the front wheels of the cart had gone wonky. What to do about it? Nothing. Where all was burned to ash before them, no fires were to be had, and the nights were long and dark, and cold beyond anything yet encountered. Cold to crack the stones, to take your life. He held the boy shivering against him, and counted each frail breath in the darkness. He woke to the sound of distant thunder and sat up. The faint light all about, quivering and sourceless, refracted the rain and drifted soup. He pulled the tarp about them, and he lay awake a long time listening. If they got wet, there'd be no fires to dry by. If they got wet, they would probably die. The bleakness, the blackness he woke to on those nights was sightless and impenetrable, a blackness to hurt your ears with listening. Often he had to get up. No sound but the wind in the bare, blackened trees. He rose and stood, tottering in that cold, autistic dark, with his arms outheld for balance, while the vestibular calculations in his skull cranked out their reckonings. An old chronicle. To seek out the upright, no fall but preceded by a declination. He took out great marching steps into the nothingness, counted them against his return. Eyes closed, arms oaring, upright to what? Something nameless in the night, lode or matrix, to which he and the stars were common satellite, like the great pendulum and its rotunda scribing through the long day movements, in the universe of which you may say it knows nothing and yet know it must. It took 2 days to cross that ashen scabland. The road beyond ran along the crest of the ridge where the barren woodland fell away on every side. It's snowing, the boy said. He looked at the sky, a single gray flake sifting down. He caught it with his hand and watched it expire. There, caught it with his hand and watched it expire there, like the last host of a Christendom. They pushed on together with the tarp pulled over them, the wet gray flakes twisting and falling out of nothing. Gray slush by the roadside. black water running from under the sodden drifts of ash. No more bale fires on the distant ridges. He thought that the blood cults must have consumed one another. No one traveled this road. No road agents, no marauders. After a while, they came to a roadside garage, and they stood within the open door and looked out at the gray sleet gusting out of the high country. They collected some old boxes and built a fire on the floor, and he found some tools and emptied out the cart and sat working on the wheel. He pulled the bolt and bored out with the collective of a hand drill. He pulled the bolt and bored out the collet with a hand drill, and re-sleeved it with a section of pipe he cut to length with a hacksaw. Then he bolted it back together and stood the cart upright, and wheeled it around the floor. It ran fairly true. The boy sat watching everything. In the morning they went on. Desolate country. A boar hide nailed to a barn door. Ratty. Wisp of a tail. Inside the barn, three bodies hanging from the rafters, dried and dusty among the wan slats of light. There could be something here, the boy said. There could be some corn or something. Let's go, the man said. Mostly worried about their shoes. That and food. Always food. In the old bat-board smokehouse they found a ham, gra grambread, grambread up in the high corner. It looked like something fetched from a tomb, so dried and drawn. He cut into it with his knife, deep red and salty meat inside, rich and good. They fried it that night over their fire, thick slabs of it, and put the slices to simmer with a tin of beans. Later he woke in the darkness, and he thought he'd heard bull drums beating somewhere in the low, dark hills. Then the wind shifted and there was silence. In dreams his pale bride came to him out of a green and leafy canopy, her nipples pipe-clayed and her rib bones painted white. She wore a dress of gauze, and her dark hair was carried up into combs of ivory, combs of shell. Her smile, her downturned eyes. In the morning it was snowing again, beads of small gray ice strung along the light wires overhead. He mistrusted all of that. He said the right dreams for a man in peril were dreams of peril, and all else was the call of languor and of death. He slept little and he slept poorly. He dreamt of walking in a flowering wood where birds flew before them. He had, and the child and the sky was aching blue, but he was learning how to wake himself up from such serene worlds. Lying there in the dark, with the uncanny taste of peach from some phantom orchard fading in his mouth, he thought if he lived long enough, the world at last would all be lost, like the dying world the newly blind inhabit, all of it slowly fading from memory. From daydreams on the road there was no waking. He plodded on. He could remember everything of her, save her scent. Seated in a theater, with her beside him, leaning forward, listening to the music. Gold scrollwork, and sconces, and the tall columnar folds of the drapes on either side of the stage. She held his hand in her lap, and he could feel the top of her stockings through the thin stuff of her summer dress. Freeze this rain. Now call down your dark and your cold and be damned. He fashioned sweeps from two old brooms he found, and wired them to the cart, and cleared the limbs from the road in front of the wheel, so he put the boy in the basket and stood on the rail like a dog musher, and they set off down the hill, gliding the cart on the curves, with their bodies in the manner of bobsledders. It was the first he'd seen the boy smile in a long time. At the crest of the hill was a curve and a pull-out in the road, an old trail that led off through the woods. They walked out and sat on a bench and looked over the valley where the land rolled away into the gritty fog. A lake down there, cold and gray and heavy in the scavenged bowl of the countryside. What is that, Papa? It's a dam. What for? It made the lake. Before the dam, before they built the dam, that was just a river down there. The dam used the water that ran through it to turn big fans called turbines that would generate electricity. To make lights. Yes, to make lights. Can we go down there and see it? I think it's too far. Will the dam be there for a long time? I think so. It's made out of concrete. We'll probably be there for hundreds of years. Thousands even. Do you think there could be fish in the lake? No, there's nothing in the lake. Not long ago somewhere, very near this place, he'd watched a falcon fall down the long blue wall of the mountain and break with the keel of its breastbone the midmost from a flight of cranes, and take it to the river below, all gangly and wrecked, and trailing its loose and blowsy plumage in the still autumn air, the grainy air. The taste of it never left your mouth. They stood in the rain like farm animals. Then they went on, holding the tarp over them in the dull drizzle. Their feet were wet and cold, and their shoes were being ruined. On the hillsides, old crops dead and flattened, the bare and ridge-lined trees raw and black in the rain, and the dreams so rich in color. How else would death call to you? Waking in the cold dawn, it all turned to ash instantly, like certain ancient frescoes entombed for centuries suddenly exposed to the day. The weather lifted in the cold, and they came at last to the broad lowland river valley, the pieced farmland still visible, everything dead to root along the barren bottomlands. They trucked up along the blacktop, tall clapboard houses, machine-rolled metal roofs, a long barn in the field with an advertisement in a faded 10-foot letters across the roof slope. See Rock City. The roadside hedges were gone to rows of black and twisted brambles, no signs of life. He left the boy standing in the road, holding the pistol, while he climbed an old set of limestone steps and walked down to the porch of a farmhouse, shading his eyes and peering in the windows. He let himself in through the kitchen, trash on the floor, old newsprint, china in a break front, cups hanging from their hooks. He went down the hallway and stood in the door to the parlor. There was an antique pump organ in the corner, a television set, cheap stuffed furniture together with an old handmade cherry wood chip robe. He climbed the stairs and walked through the bedrooms. Everything covered it with ash. A closet, a child's room, with a stuffed dog on the windowsill looking out at the garden. He went through the closets. He stripped back the beds and came away with two good woolen blankets and went back down the stairs. In the pantry were three jars of home-canned tomatoes. He blew dust from the lids and studied them. Someone before him hadn't trusted them, and in the end neither did he, and he walked out with the blankets over his shoulder, and they set off along the road again. On the outskirts of the city they came to a supermarket, a few old cars in the trash-strewn parking lot. They left the cart in the lot and walked the littered aisles. The produce section. In the bottom of the bins they found a few ancient runner beans and what looked to have been apricots, long dried to wrinkled effigies of themselves. The boy followed behind. They pushed through the rear door. In the alleyway behind the stores a few shopping carts, all badly rusted. They went back through the store again, looking for another cart, but there were none. By the door there were two soft drink machines that had been tilted over into the floor and opened with a pry bar. Coins everywhere in the ash. He sat and ran his hand across the works of the gutted machines, and in the second one, it closed over a cold metal cylinder. He withdrew his hand slowly and sat looking at a Coca-Cola. What is it, Papa? It's a treat. For you. What is it? Here, sit down. He slipped the boy's knapsack straps loose and set the pack on the floor behind him, and he put his thumbnail under the aluminum clip on the top of the can and opened it. He leaned his nose to the slight fizz coming from the can, and then handed it to the boy. Go ahead, he said. The boy took the can. It's bubbly, he said. Go ahead. He looked at his father and then tilted the can and drank. He sat there thinking about it. It's really good, he said. Yes, it is. You have some, Papa. I want you to drink it. You have some. He took the can and sipped it and handed it back. You drink it, he said. Let's just sit here. It's because I won't ever get to drink one again, isn't it? Ever's a long time. Okay, the boy said. By dusk of the day following, they were at the city. The long concrete sweeps of the interstate exchanges like the ruins of a vast funhouse against the distant murk. He carried the revolver at his belt and in the front and wore his parka unzipped. The mummied dead everywhere, the flesh-cloven bog folk, their faces of boiled sheeting, the yellow palings of their teeth. They were discalced to a man like pilgrims of some common order, for all their shoes were long since stolen. They went on, kept constant watch behind him in the mirror. The only thing that moved in the streets was blowing ash. They crossed the high concrete bridges over the river. A dock below. Small pleasure boats half sunken in the gray water. Tall stacks of downriver dim in the soup. The day following, some few miles south of the city, at a bend in the road, and half lost in the dead brambles, they came upon an old frame house with chimneys and gables and stone wall. The man stopped. Then he pushed the cart up the drive. What is this place, Papa? It's the house where I grew up. The boy stood looking at it. The peeling wooden clapboards were largely gone from the lower walls, the firewood leaving the studs and the insulation exposed. The rotted screening from the back porch lay on the concrete terrace. Are we going in? Why not? I'm scared. Don't you want to see where I used to live? No, it'll be okay. There could be someone in there. I don't think so. But suppose there is? He stood looking up at the gable to his old room. He looked at the boy. Do you want to wait here? No, you always say that. I'm sorry. I know, but you do. They slipped out of their backpacks and left them on the terrace and kicked their way through the trash on the porch and pushed into the kitchen. The boy held onto his hand, as much as he'd remembered it. The room's empty. In the small room off the dining room there was a bare iron pot, a metal folding table, some cast iron coal grate, and the small fireplace. The pine paneling was gone from the walls, leaving just the fur strips. He stood there. He felt his thumb in the painted wood of the mantel and pinholes from tacks that had held stockings 40 years ago. And this is where we used to have Christmas when I was a boy. He turned and looked out at the waste of the yard, a tangle of dead lilac, the shape of a hedge. On the cold winter nights when the electricity was out in the storm we would sit at the fire here, me and my sisters, doing our homework. The boy watched him, watched shapes claiming him he could not see. We should go, Papa, he said. Yes, the man said, but he didn't. They walked through the dining room where the fire brick in the hearth was as yellow as the day, and it was laid because his mother could not bear to see it blackened. The floor buckled from the rainwater. In the living room the bones of a small animal, dismembered in a pile and placed in a pile. Possibly a cat. A glass tumbler by the door. The boy gripped his hand. They went up the stairs and turned and went down the hallway. Small cones of damp plaster standing in the floor. the wooden lashes of the ceiling exposed. He stood in the doorway of it to his room, a small space under the eaves. This is where I used to sleep. My cot was against the wall. In the nights, in their thousands, the dreams of a child's imaginings, worlds rich or fearful, such as might offer themselves, but never the one to be. He pushed open the door, um, he pushed open the closet door, half expecting to find his childhood things. Raw, cold daylight fell through them from the roof, gray as his heart. We should go, Papa. Can we go? Yes, we can go. I'm scared. I know, I'm sorry. I'm really scared. It's all right. We shouldn't have come. 3 nights later, in the foothills of the eastern mountains, he woke in the darkness to hear something coming. He lay with his hands at either side of him. The ground was trembling. It was coming towards them. Papa? The boy said, Papa? Shh, it's okay. What is it, Papa? It neared, growing louder, everything trembling. Then it passed beneath him like an underground train and drew away into the night and was gone. The boy clung to him, crying, his head buried against his chest. Shh, it's all right. I'm so scared. I know. It's all right. It's gone. What was it, Papa? It was an earthquake. It's gone now. We're all right. Shh. In those first years, the roads were peopled with refugees, shrouded in their clothing, wearing masks and goggles, sitting in their rags by the side of the road like ruined aviators, their burrows heaped with shoddy, towing wagons or carts, their eyes bright in their skulls, creedless shells of men tottering down the causeways like migrants in a fever land. The frailty of everything revealed at last. Old and troubling issues resolved into nothingness at night and night. The last instance of a thing takes the class with it, turns out the light, and it's gone, and is gone. Look around you. Ever is a long time. But the boy knew what he knew, and ever is no time at all. He sat by a gray window in the light in the gray light in an abandoned house in the late afternoon and read old newspapers while the boy slept. The curious news, the quaint concerns. At 8 the primrose closes. He watched the boy sleeping. Can you do it? When the time comes, can you? They squatted in the road and ate cold rice and cold beans that they'd cooked days ago, already beginning to ferment. No place to build a fire that would not be seen. They slept huddled together in the rank quilts in the dark and the cold. He held the boy close to him, so thin. My heart, he said, my heart. But he knew, if he were a good father, still it might well be as she said, that the boy was all that stood between him and death. Late in the year, he hardly knew the month. He thought that they had enough food to get through the mountains, but there was no way to tell. They passed at the watershed was the pass at the watershed was 5,000 feet, and it was going to be very cold. He said that everything depended on reaching the coast. Yet in the night he knew that all this was empty and no substance to it. There was a good chance they would die in the mountains, and that would be that. They passed through the ruins of a resort town and took the road south. Burnt, burnt forests for miles along the slopes, and snow sooner than they would have thought. No tracks in the road, nothing living anywhere. The fire-blackened boulders like the shapes of bears on the starkly wooden slopes. He stood on the stone bridge where the waters slurried into a pool and turned slowly in a great foam, in a gray foam, where once he'd watched trout swaying in the current, tracking their perfect shadows on the stones beneath. They went on, the boy trudging in his tracks, leaning into the cart, winding slowly upward through the switchbacks. There were fires still burning high in the mountains, and at night they could see the light from the deep orange in the soot fall. It was getting colder, but they had campfires all night and left them burning behind them when they set out again in the morning. He'd wrapped their feet in sacking tied. He'd wrapped their feet in sacking tied with cord, and so far the snow was only a few inches deep, but he knew that if it got much deeper, they would have to leave the cart. Already it was hard going, and he stopped often to rest, slogging to the edge of the road with his back to the child where he stood bent with his hands on his knees, coughing. He raised up and stood with weeping eyes. On the gray snow a fine mist of blood. They camped against a boulder, and he made a shelter with poles with tarp. He got a fire going, and they set about dragging up a great brush pile of wood to see them through the night. They'd piled a mat of dead hemlock burrows over the snow, and they sat wrapped in their blankets watching the fire and drinking the last of the cocoa scavenged weeks before. It was snowing again, soft flakes drifting down out of the blackness. He dozed in the wonderful warmth. The boy's shadow crossed over him, carrying an armload of wood. He watched him stoke the flames. God's own fire drake. The sparks rushed upwards and died in the starless night. Not all dying words are true, and this blessing is no less real for being shorn of its ground. He woke toward the morning, with the fire down to coals, and walked out to the road. Everything was alight, as if the lost sun was returning at last. The orange snow was qu- the snow was orange and quivering. A forest fire was making its way along the tinder box ridges above them, flaring and shimmering against the overcast like the northern lights. Cold as it was, he stood there for a long time. The color of it moved something in him long forgotten. Make a list, recite a litany, remember. It was colder. Nothing moved in that high world. A rich smell of wood smoke hung over the road. He pushed the cart on through the snow, few miles each day. He'd no notion of how far the summit might be. They ate sparingly and they were hungry all the time. He stood looking out over the country, a river far below. How far had they come? In his dreams she was sick and he cared for her. The dream bore the look of sacrifice, but he thought differently. Did not care for her, and she died alone somewhere in the dark, and there is no other dream, nor other waking world, and there is no other tale to tell. On the road there are no God-spoken men. They are gone, and I am left, and they have taken with them the world. Query. How does the never to be differ from what never was? Dark of the invisible moon, the nights now only slightly less black. By day the banished sun circles the earth like a grieving mother with a lamp. People sitting on the sidewalk in half-drawn immolate and smoking in their clothes, like failed secretary, secretarian suicides. Others would come to help them. Within a year there were fires on the ridges and deranged chantings, the screams of the murdered. By day the dead impaled on spikes along the road. What had they done? He thought that in the history of the world it might even be that there was more punishment than crime, but he took small comfort from it. The air grew thin, and he thought the summit could not be far. Perhaps tomorrow. Tomorrow came and went. It didn't snow again, but the snow in the road was 6 inches deep, and pushing the cart up those grades was exhausting work. He thought they would have to leave it. How much could they carry? He stood and looked out over the barren slopes. The ash fell on the snow till it was all black, all but black. At every curve it looked as though the pail lay just ahead. And then one evening he stopped and looked all about and he recognized it. He unsnapped the throat of his parka and lowered the hood and stood listening. The wind in the dead black stands of hemlock, the empty parking lot at the overlook. The boy stood beside him, where he'd once stood with his own father in a winter long ago. "What is it, papa?" the boy said. "It's the Gap. This is it." In the morning they pressed on. It was very cold. Toward the afternoon it began to snow again, and they made camp early and crouched under the lean-to of a tarp and watched the snow fall from the fire. The morning there were several inches of snow on the ground, but the snow had stopped, and it was so quiet that they could all but hear their hearts. He piled wood on the coals and fanned the fire to life, and trudged out through the drifts to dig out their cart. He sorted through the cans and went back, and they sat by the fire, and ate the last of their crackers and a tin of sausage. In a pocket of his knapsack he found the last packet of cocoa, and fixed it for the boy, and then poured his own cup with hot water, and sat blowing at the rim. "You promised not to do that," the boy said. "What?" "You know what, papa." He poured the hot water back into the pan, and took the boy's cup and poured some of it into his cocoa, and poured some of the cocoa into his own, and then handed it back. "I have to watch you all the time," the boy said. "I know. If you break little promises, you'll break big ones. That's what you said." "I know, but I won't." They slogged all day down the south-facing slope of the watershed. In the deeper drifts of the cart, uh, in the deeper drifts, the cart wouldn't push at all, and he began to drag it behind them with one hand while he broke trail. Anywhere but in the mountains they might have found something to use as a sled. An old metal sign or a sheet of roof tin. The wrappings on their feet had soaked through, and they were cold and wet all day. He leaned on the cart to get his breath, while the boy waited. There was a sharp crack from somewhere on the mountain. Then another. "It's just a tree falling," he said. "It's okay." The boy was looking at the dead roadside trees. "It's okay," the man said. "All the trees in the world are going to fall sooner or later, but not on us." "How do you know?" "I just know." Still they came to the trees across the road, where they were forced to unload the cart and carry everything over the trunks and then repack it all on the far side. The boy found toys he forgot he had. He kept out a yellow truck, and they went on with it sitting on top of the tarp. It camped in a bench of land on the far side of a frozen roadside creek. The wind had blown the ash from the ice, and the ice was black, and the creek looked like a path of basalt winding through the woods. They collected firewood from the north side of the slope, where it was not so wet, pushing over the whole trees and dragging them into camp. They got fire going, and spread the tarp and hung their wet clothes on poles to steam and stink, and they sat wrapped in quilts, naked, while the man held the boy's feet against his stomach to warm them. He woke whimpering in the night, and the man held him. "Shh," he said. "Shh, it's okay. I had a bad dream." "I know. Should I tell you what it was?" "If you want." "I had this penguin that you wound up, and it would waddle and flap its flippers. And we were in that house you used to live in, and it came around the corner, but nobody had wound it up, and it was really scary." "Okay." "It was a lot scarier in the dream." "I know. Dreams can be really scary." "Why did I have that scary dream?" "I don't know, but it's okay now. I'm going to put some wood on the fire. You go to sleep." The boy didn't answer, and then he said, "The winder wasn't ready." It took 4 more days to come down out of the snow, and even then there were patches of snow in certain bends of the road, and the road was black and wet from the up-country runoff even beyond that. They came out along the rim of a deep gorge, and far down in the darkness a river. They stood listening. Huge rock bluffs on the far side of the canyon with thin black trees clinging to the escarpment. The sound of the river faded. Then it returned. A cold wind blowing up from the country below. They were all day reaching the river. They left the cart in a parking area and walked out through the woods, a low thunder coming from the valley. It was a waterfall dropping off a high shelf of rock and was falling 80 feet through the gray shroud of mist into a pool below. They could smell the water, and they could feel cold coming off it, a bench of wet river gravel. He stood and watched the boy. Wow, the boy said. He couldn't take his eyes off it. He squatted and scooped up a handful of stones and smelled them and let it fall back clattering, polished round and smooth as marbles or lozenges of stones veined and striped, black distillates and bits of polished quartz all bright from the mist of the river. The boy walked out and squatted and laved up the dark water. The waterfall fell into a pool almost at its center, a gray curd circling. They stood side by side, calling to each other over the din. Is it cold? Yes, it's freezing. Do you want to go in? I don't know. Sure you do. Is it okay? Come on. He unzipped his parka and let it fall to the gravel, and the boy stood up. They undressed and walked out into the water, ghostly pale and shivering. The boy so thin it stopped his heart. He drove headlong and came up gasping and turned and stood, beating his arms. Is it over my head? The boy called. No, come on. He stood and swam out to the falls and let the water beat upon him. The boy was standing in the pool to his waist, holding his shoulders and hopping up and down. The man went back and got him. He held him and floated him about. The boy gasping and chopping at the water. You're doing good, the man said. You're doing good. They dressed shivering, then climbed the trail to the upper river. They walked out along the rocks to see where the river seemed to end in space, and he held the boy while he ventured out to the last ledge of rock. The river went sucking over the rim and fell straight down into the pool below. The entire river. He clung to the man's arm. It's really far, he said. It's pretty far. Would you die if you fell? You'd get hurt. It's a long way. It's really scary. They walked out through the woods. The light was failing. They followed the flats along the upper river among huge dead trees. A rich southern wood that once held May apples and Pipsesua ginseng. I don't know what that is. The raw dead limbs of the rhododendron twisted and knotted and black. He stopped. Something in the mulch and ash. He stopped and cleared it away. A small colony of them, shrunken, dried, and wrinkled. He picked one up, held it, and sniffed it. He bit a piece from the edge and chewed. What is it, Papa? Morels. It's morels. What's morels? They're a kind of mushroom. Can you eat them? Yes, take a bite. Are they good? Take a bite. The boy smelled the mushroom and bit into it and stood chewing. He looked at his father. These are pretty good, he said. They put the morels from they pulled the morels from the ground, small alien-looking things that he piled in the hood of the boy's parka. They hiked back out to the road and down to where they'd left the cart and made a camp by the river pool in the falls and washed the earth and ash from the morels and put them to soak in a pan of water. By the time he had a fire going, it was dark, and he sliced a handful of the mushrooms on a log for dinner, and they scooped them into a frying pan with pork fat and a can of beans and set them to simmer in the coals. The boy watched him. This is a good place, Papa, he said. They ate little mushrooms together with the beans and drank tea and had tinned pears for dessert. He banged the fire against the seam of rock where he'd built it and strung the tarp behind them to reflect the heat, and they sat warm in their refuge while he told stories to the boy, old stories of courage and justice, as he remembered them, until the boy was asleep, and his blankets, and then he stoked the fire and lay down in full and listened to the low rumble, the low thunder of the falls beyond them, in that dark and threadbare wood. I'm going to stop there for a second because I need a break. Pretty good book. I hope I'm not butchering it too much. I really enjoy it. The language is hard, but it's cool. I also don't know where I left off. Oh, right here. So yeah, I'll be right back. Give me like 5 minutes. Whoa, I'm back. It was a little longer than a 5-minute break. But then again, I've been streaming for like an hour. Reading is hard, so I'm gonna try to take my time a little bit going forward because I feel like I sound not bad, but it's a hard book, so I might end up having to look up some stuff too, which we can do as a team because some of these words are a little bit like slut lamp. Didn't know what that was called. Kind of caught me off guard when I read over that line. So I had never heard that before. Yeah. I think my favorite line this entire book is something that I read already, which was his child was his only warrant, and if he was not the word of God, then God has never spoken. I don't know like what reason that's my favorite line. I just think it's really cool. It sounds cool coming out. Like you try to say it. Yeah, it was pretty good. Pretty good. Sounds cool when you say it too. I think I said it. No. Yeah, I said it a little bit better, but I just got a notification on my phone. I can't read it though because I'm using my phone as a webcam. Like I have my computer right here that I'm watching the stream on, and I'm using my phone as a webcam, and I'm using the iPad to read. Pretty good setup I've got. Thank you. You're welcome. Yeah. My lips are cracking so much. I don't know if you can see that. I know. But it feels like they're being shredded just from me talking. My mouth is so dry. I know. Complain. Why don't you get back to it, Richie? Why don't you get back to it? Why don't you read a little bit? Smart boy. Yeah, I think I will get back to it. Where did we leave off? Ugh. They were eating morals, which I have no idea what a moral is. This will be the first, I guess, opportunity. Hello. Okay, I'm back. When I switch to YouTube, which is what I've got this backing track for rain to set the mood, it always mutes my mic, which is dumb. So I just want to make sure. Yeah, we're still going. But you can see Google, right? No, my freaking face is in front of it. Okay. All right, this might be a little unprofessional, but we're gonna move things real quick. You're seeing the behind the scenes work. Okay, and we'll go back here. So we'll say, more. We'll get started again. So, what is it, Papa? It's morals. What kind of morals? What kind of mushroom? Voice mountain morals. Okay. I'll start from the last paragraph that I read. They ate the little mushrooms together with the black beans and drank tea and had tin pears for dessert. He banked the fire against the seam of the rock where he'd built it, and he strung the tarp behind them to reflect the heat, and they sat warm in their refuge while he told the boy stories. Old stories of courage and justice,
as he remembered them until the boy was asleep in his blankets. And then he stoked the fire and lay down warm and full and listened to the low thunder of the falls behind them in that dark and threadbare wood. He walked out in the morning and took the river path downstream. The boy was right that it was a good place to be, and he wanted to check for any signs of other visitors. He found nothing. He stood watching the river where it slung loping into a pool and curled and eddied. He dropped a white stone into the water, but it vanished as suddenly as if it had been eaten. He stood at such a river once. He stood at such a river once, and watched the flash of trout deep in a pool, invisible to see in the tea-colored water, except as they turned on their sides to feed, reflecting back the sun deep in the darkness like a flash of knives in a cave. "We can't stay," he said. "It's getting colder every day, and the waterfall is an attraction. It was for us, and it will be for others, and we don't know who they will be, and we can't hear them coming. It's not safe." "We could stay one more day." "It's not safe." "Well, maybe we could find some other place on the river." "We have to keep moving. We have to keep heading south." "Doesn't the river go south?" "No, it doesn't." "Can I see it on the map?" "Yes, let me get it." The tattered oil company road map had once been taped together, but now it was just sorted into leaves and numbered with crayons in the corner for their assembly. He sorted through the limp pages, and spread out those that answered to their location. "We crossed a bridge here. It looks to be about 8 miles or so. This is the river, going east. We followed the road along the eastern slope of the mountains. These are our roads, the black lines of the map, the state roads." "Why are they state roads?" "Because they used to belong to the states, what used to be called the states. But there's not states anymore." "No." "What happened to them?" "Don't know exactly. That's a good question. But the roads are still there." "Yes, for a while." "How long is a while?" "I don't know. Maybe quite a while. There's nothing to uproot them, so they should stay for a while." "But there won't be any cars or trucks on them." "No." "Okay. Are you ready?" The boy nodded. He wiped his nose on his sleeve and shouldered up his small pack, and the man folded away the map sections and rose. The boy followed him out through the gray palings of the trees to the road. Gray palings? When the bridge came in sight below them, there was a tractor-trailer jackknifed sideways across it and wedged into the buckled iron railings. It was raining again, and they stood there, with the rain pattering softly on the tarp, peering out from under the blue gloom plastic beneath the plastic. "Can we get around it?" the boy said. "I don't think so. We can probably get under it. We may have to unload the cart." The bridge spanned the river above the rapids. They could hear the noise of it as they came of it. They could hear the noise of it as they came around the curve in the road. A wind was coming down the gorge, and they pulled the corners of the tarp about them, and pushed the cart out onto the bridge. They could see the river through the ironwork. Below the rapids was a huge railroad bridge, laid on limestone piers. The stones of the piers were stained well above the river from the high water, and the bend of the river was choked with great windows of black limbs and brush and the trunks of trees. The truck had been there for years, the tires flat and crumpled under the rims. The front of the tractor was jammed against the railing of the bridge, and the trailer had sheared forward off the top plate and jammed up against this back of the cab. The rear of the trailer had swung out and buckled the rail on the other side of the bridge, and it hung several feet out over the river gorge. He pushed the cart up under the trailer, but the handle wouldn't clear. They'd have to slide it under sideways. He left it crouched there in the dry while he climbed up on the gas tank step and wiped the water from the glass and peered inside the cab. He stepped back down and reached out and opened the door and then climbed in and pulled the door shut behind him. He sat looking around. An old doghouse sleeper behind the seats. Papers on the floor. The glove box was open, but it was empty. He climbed back between the seats. There was a raw, damp mattress on the bunk and a small refrigerator with the door standing open. A fold-down table. Old magazines on the floor. He went through the plywood lockers overhead, and they were empty. There were drawers under the bunk, and he pulled them out and looked through the trash. He climbed forward into the cab again and sat in the driver's seat and looked out down the river through the slow trickle of water on the glass. The thin drum of rain on the metal roof and the slow darkness falling over everything. They sat that night in the trunk, and in the morning the rain had stopped and they unloaded the cart and passed everything under the truck to the other side and reloaded it. Down the bridge 100 feet or so were the blackened remains of tires where they had been burned there. They stood looking at the trailer. "What do you think is in there?" he said. "I don't know. We're not the first ones here, so probably nothing. There's no way to get in." He put his ear to the side of the trailer and whacked the sheet metal with the flat of his hand. "It sounds empty," he said. "You can probably get in from the roof. Somebody would have cut a hole in it in the side by now." "What would they have cut it with?" "They'd find something." He took off his parka and laid it across the top of the cart and climbed on the fender of the tractor, and onto the hood and clambered up over the windscreen of the roof of the cab. He stood and turned and looked down the river. Wet metal underfoot. Wet metal underfoot. He looked down at the boy. The boy looked worried. He turned and reached and got a grip of the front of the trailer and slowly pulled himself up. It was all he could do, and there was a lot less of him to pull. He got one leg over the edge and hung there resting. Then he pulled himself up and rolled over and sat up. There was a skylight about a third of the way down the roof, and he made his way to it in a walking crouch. The cover was gone, and inside the trailer smelled of wet plywood and that sour smell he'd come to know. He had a magazine in his hip pocket, and he took it out and tore some pages from it and wadded them and got out his lighter and lit the pages and dropped them into the darkness. Faint swooshing. He wafted away the smoke and looked down into the trailer. A small fire burning in the floor seemed a long way down. He shielded the glare of it with his hand, and when he could almost see the rear of the box, human bodies, sprawled in every attitude, dried and shrunken in their rotted clothes. A small wad of burning paper drew down to the wisp of a flame, and then died out, leaving a faint pattern for just a moment in the incandescent like a shape of flower, a molten rose. Then all was dark again. They camped that night in the woods on a ridge overlooking the broad Piedmont plain, where it stretched away to the south. He built a cook fire against the rock, and they ate the last of the morels and a can of spinach. In the night, a storm broke in the mountains above them, and came cannonading cannonading, down country cracking and booming, and the stark gray world appeared again and again out of the night in a shrouded flare of lightning. The boy clung to him. It all passed on. A brief rattle of hail, and then the slow, cold rain. When he woke again, it was still dark, but the rain had stopped. A smoky light out there in the valley. He rose and walked out along the ridge, a haze of fire that stretched for miles. He squatted and watched it. He could smell the smoke. He wet his finger and held it to the wind. When he rose and turned to the when he rose and turned to go back to the tarp. To go back, the tarp was lit from somewhere within where the boy had wakened. Seated there in the darkness, the frail blue shape of it looked like a pinch of some last venture at the edge of the world. Something all but unaccountable, and so it was. All the day following, they traveled through the drifted haze of wood smoke. In the draws of the smoke coming off the ground like mist, and the thin black trees burning on the slopes like strands of heathen candles. Late in the day, they came to a place where the fire had crossed the road, and the macadam was still warm, and further on it began to soften underfoot. The hot black mastic sucking at their shoes and stretching in thin bands as they stepped. They stopped. "We'll have to wait," he said. They backtracked and camped in the actual road, and when they went on in the morning, the macadam had cooled. By and by, they came to a set of tracks cooled in the tar. They just suddenly appeared. He squatted and studied them. Someone had come out of the woods in the night and continued down the melted roadway. "Who was it?" said the boy. "I don't know. Who was anybody?" Okay. Okay, guys. No need to get philosophical about it. They came upon him shuffling along the road before them, dragging one leg slightly and stopping from time to time to stand stooped and uncertain before setting out again. "What should we do, Papa?" We're all right. Let's just follow and watch." "Take a look," the boy said. "Yes, take a look." They followed him a good ways, but at his pace they were losing the day, and finally he just sat in the road and did not get up again. The boy hung on to his father's coat. No one spoke. He was as burnt-looking as the country, his clothes scorched and black. One of his eyes was burnt shut, and his hair was but a nitty wig of ash upon his blackened skull. As they passed, he looked down, as if he'd done something wrong. His shoes were bound up with wire and coated with road tar, and he just sat there in silence, bent over his rags. The boy kept looking back. "Papa," he'd whispered, "what is wrong with the man?" "He's been struck by lightning." "Can't we help him, Papa?" "No, we can't help him." The boy kept pulling at his coat. "Papa," he said. "Stop it." "Can't we call him? Can't we help him, Papa?" "No, we can't help him. There's nothing to be done for him." They went on. The boy was crying. He kept looking back. When they got to the bottom of the hill, the man stopped and looked at him, and looked back up the road. The burned man had fallen over, and at that distance you couldn't even tell what it was. "I'm sorry," he said, "but we have nothing to give him. We have no way to help him. I'm sorry for what happened to him, but we can't fix it. You know that, don't you?" The boy stood looking down. He nodded his head. Then he went back. Then he went on, and he didn't look back again. At evening, a dull sulphur light from the trees. The standing water on the roadside ditches, black with the runoff. The mountains shrouded away. They crossed the river by a concrete bridge where skeins of ash and slurry moved slowly in the current, charred bits of wood. In the end, they stopped and turned back and camped under the bridge. He'd carried his billfold about till it wore a corner hole in his trousers. Then one day he sat by the roadside and took it out and went through its contents. Some money, credit cards, his driver's license, a picture of his wife. Spread everything out on the blacktop like gaming cards. He pitched the sweet blackened piece of leather into the woods, the sweat blackened piece of leather into the woods, and sat holding the photograph. Then he laid it down in the road, and also, then he laid it down in the road also, and then he stood and went on. He left the picture of his wife in the road, along with his credit cards and stuff. You don't need them. What do you need them for? I maybe would have kept the picture of my wife, but you know, I'm also not in his situation, so. In the morning, he lay looking up at the clay nests that swallows had built in the corners under the bridge. He looked at the boy, but the boy had turned away and lay staring out at the river. There was nothing we could have done. He didn't answer. He's going to die. We can't share what we have or will die too. I know. So when are you going to talk to me again? I'm talking now. Are you sure? Yes. Okay. Okay. They stood on the far shore of a river and called to him. Tattered gods, slouching in their rags across the waste, trekking the dried floor of a mineral sea where it lay cracked and broken like fallen plate, paths of feral fire in the coagulated sands. The figures faded in the distance. He woke and lay in the dark. The clock stopped at 1:17. A long sheer of light and then a series of low concussions. He got up and went to the window. What was it? She said. He didn't answer. He went into the bathroom and threw the light switch, but the power was already gone. Dull rose glow in the window glass. He dropped to one knee and raised the lever to stop the tub, and then turned on both taps as far as they would go. She was standing in the doorway in her nightwear, clutching the jamb, cradling her belly in one hand. What is it? She said. What is happening? I don't know. Why are you taking a bath? I'm not. Once in those early years, he'd waken in the barren wood and lay listening to flocks of migratory birds overhead in that bitter dark, their half-muted crankings miles above where they circled the earth as senselessly as the insects trooping the rim of a bowl. He wished them Godspeed till they were gone, and he never heard them again. He'd a deck of cards he'd found in a bureau drawer in a house, and the cards were worn and spindled, and the two of clubs was missing, but they still played sometimes by firelight, wrapped in their blankets. He tried to remember the rules of childhood games, old maid, some version of whist. He was sure he had them mostly wrong, and he made up a few games and gave them made up names. Abnormal Feshkir or cat barf. Sometimes the child would ask him about the world, what the world was like. Where I just lost where I was. Sometimes the child would ask him questions about the world that for him was not even a memory. He thought hard how to answer. There is no past. What would you like? But he stopped making things up because those things were not true either, and the telling made him feel sad. The child had his own fantasies. How things would be in the South, other children. He tried to keep the rein on this, but his heart was not in it. Whose would be? No list of things to be done. The day providential to itself. The hour. There is no later. This is later. All things of grace and beauty, such that one holds them to one's heart, have a common provenance and pain, their birth and grief and ashes. So he whispered to the sleeping boy, I have you. He thought about the picture in the road, and he thought that he should have tried to keep her in their lives in some way, but he didn't know how. He woke coughing and walked out so as to not wake the child, following a stone wall in the dark, wrapped in his blanket, kneeling in the ashes like a penitent, penitent. He coughed till he could taste the blood. He coughed until he tasted the blood, and he said her name aloud. He thought perhaps he'd said it in his sleep. When he got back, the boy was awake. I'm sorry, he said. It's okay. Go to sleep. I wish I was with Mom. He didn't answer. He sat beside the small figure wrapped in his quilts and blankets. After a while, he said, You mean that you wish you were dead? Yes. You mustn't say that. But I do. Don't say it. It's a bad thing to say. I can't help it. I know, but you have to. How do I do it? I don't know. We're survivors, he told her across the flame of a lamp. Survivors, she said. Yes. What in God's name are you talking about? We're not survivors. We're the walking dead in a horror film. I'm begging you. I don't care. I don't care if you cry. It doesn't mean anything to me. Please, stop it. I'm begging you, I'll do anything. Such as what? I should have done it a long time ago, when there were 3 bullets in the gun instead of 2. I was stupid. We've been all over this. I didn't bring myself to do this. I was brought. And now I'm done. I thought about not even telling you. That would probably have been best. You have 2 bullets, and then what? You can't protect us. You say you would die for us, but what good is that? I'd take him with me if it weren't for you. You know I would. It's the right thing to do. You're talking crazy. No, I'm speaking the truth. Sooner or later, they'll catch us and they will kill us. They will rape me, they'll rape him. They're going to rape us and kill us and eat us, and you won't face it. You'd rather wait for it to happen. But I can't. I can't. She sat there smoking a slender length of dried grapevine, as if it were some rare cheroot, holding it with certain elegance, her other hand across her knees, where she'd drawn them up. She watched him across the small flame. We used to talk about death, she said. We don't do that anymore. Why is that? I don't know. Because it's here. There's nothing left to talk about. I wouldn't leave you. I don't care. It's meaningless. You can think of me as a faithless slut, if you'd like. I've taken a new lover. He can give me what you cannot. Death is not a lover. Oh, yes, he is. Please don't do this. I'm sorry. I can't do it alone. Then don't. I can't help you. They say that women dream of danger in those that care, and men of danger to themselves. But I don't dream at all. You say you can't? Then don't do it. That's all. Because I am done with my own whorish heart, and I have been for a long time. You are talking about a stand, but there is no stand to take. My heart was ripped out of me the night he was born, so don't ask for sorrow now. There is none. Maybe you'll be good at this. I doubt it, but who knows? The one thing I can tell you is that you won't survive for yourself. I know because I wouldn't have gotten this far. I would never have come this far. A person who has no one would be well advised to cobble together some passable ghost, breathe it into being and coax it along with words of love. Offer it each phantom crumb and shield it from harm with your body. As if for me, as if for me, my only hope is for eternal nothingness, and I hope it with all my heart. He didn't answer. You have no argument because there is none. Will you not tell him goodbye? No, I will not. Just wait till morning, please. I have to go. She had already stood up. For the love of God, woman, what am I to tell him? I can't help you. Where are you going? What are you going to? Where are you going to go? You can't even see. I don't have to. He stood up. I'm begging you, he said. I will not. I cannot. She was gone, and the coldness of it was her final gift. She would do it with a flake of obsidian. He taught her himself, sharper than steel, the edge an atom thick. And she was right. There was no argument. The hundreds of nights they sat up arguing the pros and cons of self destruction with the eagerness of philosophers chained to a madhouse wall. In the morning the boy said nothing at all, and when they were packed and ready to set out upon the road, he turned his back at their campsite and he said, She's gone, isn't she? And he said, Yes, she is. Always so deliberate, hardly surprised by the outlandish events, a creation perfectly evolved to meet its own end. They sat at the window and ate their robes by candlelight, and midnight supper and watched distant cities burn. A few nights later she gave birth in their beds, and by the light of a dry cell lamp, gloves meant for dishwashing, the improbable appearance of a small crown of the head, shrieked with blood and lank black hair, a rank meconium. I don't know what that means. Meconium. Her cries meant nothing to him. Beyond the window, just the gathering cold, the fires on the horizon. He held aloft the scrawny red body, so raw and naked, the cut cord with kitchen shears, and wrapped his son in a towel. Do you have any friends? Yes, I did. Lots of them? Yes. Do you remember them? Yes, I remember them. What happened to them? They died. All of them? Yes, all of them. Do you miss them? Yes, I do. Where are we going? We're going south. Okay. They were all day on the long black road, stopping in the afternoon to eat sparingly from their meager supplies. The boy took his truck from the pack and shaved the roads in the ash with a stick. The truck tooled along slowly, and he made truck noises. The day seemed almost warm, and they slept in the leaves with their packs under their heads. Something woke him. He turned on his side and lay listening. He raised his head slowly, the pistol in his hand. He looked down at the boy, and when he looked back towards the road, the first of them were already coming into view. God, he whispered. He reached and shook the boy, keeping his eyes on the road. They came shuffling through the ash, casting their hooded heads from side to side. Some of them were wearing canister masks, one in a biohazard suit, stained and filthy, slouching along with clubs in their hands, length of pipe, coughing. And then he heard the road behind them, what sounded like a diesel truck. Quick, he whispered, quick. He shoved the pistol into his belt and grabbed the boy by the hand, and he dragged the cart through the trees and tilted it over where it would not be seen so easily. The boy was frozen with fear. He pulled him to him. It was all right, he said. We have to run. Don't look back. Come on. He slung their knapsacks over his shoulder, and they tore through the crumbling bracken. The boy was terrified. Run, he whispered. Run. He looked back. The truck had rumbled into view. Men standing in the bed looking out. The boy fell, and he pulled him up. It's all right, he said. Come on. He could hear a break through the trees, and he thought it was a ditch or a cut, but they came out through the weeds into an old roadway, plates of a cracked macadam showing through the drifts of ash. Macadam. He pulled the boy down. and they crouched under a bank, listening, gasping for breath. They could hear the diesel engine out of the road, running on God knows what. When he raised up to look, he could just see the tops of the truck moving along the road. Men standing on the stake bed, some of them holding rifles. The truck passed on, and the diesel smoke coiled through the woods. The motor sounded ropey, missing and puttering, then quit. He sank down and put his hands on the top of his head. God, he said. He could hear the thing rattle and flap to a halt.